would normally be called by one of the old Smith, but unfortunately he's not very well, so I thought of him this evening suffering. But we have a very worthy substitute. I call upon grace from Lawrence Price.
Some have eaten and can eat, and some will eat that want it, but we have eat and we can eat, and may the Lord be thanked. Amen.
Since I can't
Oh, I'm really remote here. Yeah, I think they've given us so much space. Yeah, well, we've been just left to ourselves here. You can move up. I don't mind you moving up. Huh? You can move up if
Would you like to come? You're better off there, aren't you?
I'm fine.
You can come here if you like.
No.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you, what was your name? Mick. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jock Meikle. I'm from Falkirk, which is the Gaelic for hypothermia. I'll tell you, when Keith rang me a few months ago now to say would I be able to come down all the way from London to do this, I said, of course I would be delighted. What a great club. Heard all about it. I didn't expect them to reverse the charges. Lawrence never made it to London, so I brought him along tonight. He never went outside, he only got to Newcastle. Are you from Newcastle? I'm from Inverness. He only got as far as Newcastle in his lifetime. So first thing to say, and this is something about health. This is not a health warning, this is a health reassurance. We've all heard about E. coli, Ebola, salmonella, all these horrible bloody things that kill you. But be reassured, nothing survives being boiled in this bath. Burton's never made it to London or beyond Newcastle, but his son, his youngest son, William, carpenter, cabinet maker actually, ended up in London, living just off the Strand, and he became an elder of the Crown Court Church of Scotland, and I was part of that as well at some point. So Burton's eventually made it. But picture the scene. Think of the second half of the 18th century in rural Scotland, in Ayrshire. It's a funny place, Ayrshire. It's the way down there, and folk are funny down there. Still are. But think of the fair that they would have had in January and February and in the winter time. Tatties, sour milk with porridge, poached salmon, no, poached salmon, and very, very rough whiskey, because in those days Whiskey was a very, very agricultural thing, very, very smokeless thing. And actually claret was the national drink of Scotland until about 1810. So think of rough whiskey, sour milk and pork. Now, 500 yards from this august place, think of the cornucopia of food available to us from every part of the world. Vietnam, China, Glasgow, everywhere. Can you imagine what Burns would have made of this fantastic bill of fare available to us? I think he would have got food on a tiramisu. He would have been in a great, great hurry to get a hot vindaloo curry. And he would have gone ratty for an organic, soft, flat latte. Now, thinking of the audience, many won't understand Lowland Scots. So I had a team of interpreters in Edinburgh working through the night to turn the Lowland Scots of that vintage into understandable English. I got the facts just outside when I came in, so you must forgive me when I come to the English part. I have to refer to my notes. There we are. This is a fantastic night, by the way. Excuse me. Therefore, your honest, sun-safe face, great chieftain of the Puddin race, I've been the more you take your place, pinch, tripe or therm, and we'll, have you word their grace as langs my ear. English. The overloaded serving tray there you fill, your buttocks shaped like a distant hilltop. Your wooden skewer can be used to fix a mill if need be, or through your pores your juices drip like liquid gold. Very good, isn't it? They're quite good, these people in Edinburgh. His knife, say rustic labour dick, and cut ye up the ready slick, trenching your gushing entrails brick, like ony ditch. And then, Chairman, oh, what a glorious sight, warm, reeking, navel rich. English. Then spoonful after spoonful they eagerly eat. The devil will get the last bit, on they go, until all their well-stretched stomachs, by and by, are bent like drums. Then the head of the family, about to burst, murmurs, thank the Lord. Scots. Now, is there is French ragout, or olio that would stir a soup, or fricassee that would make you spew with perfect stomach. We look down with scornful view and sick of dinner. English. Sorry to pick you out. Poor devil. Poor devil. See him over his trash, as feeble as a withered bulrush. His skinny leg no thicker than a thin rope, his fist the size of a nut. Through a river or field to travel, completely unfit. But no, the rustic Haggis way, trembling out his ounce his thread, clapping his willy needle blade, and he'll make a whistle, and legs and heads and arms will snap, like taps of thistle. I'll finish the stop. You powers will make mankind your care, and dish them out their bill of fare. All Scotland wants nae skinking ware that jops and luggies. No, but if you wish her grateful prayer, gie her a haggis! Thank you. Sláinte.
Sláinte. Sláinte. Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to be judge your glasses and after me say a toast to the Haggis. The Haggis!
Haggis!
Go. Wait a minute.
He's still breathing.
Kill it on.
Is there a doctor?
This Haggis is speaking to me.
Speaking to me.
Chairman, it's up to you. It's saying it would like the right to reply. Shall we do it? Yes. Well, he gave me a wee sheet. I hope I get it right. This is from the Haggis to me and all of us. I'm a humble Hieland Haggis from a glen above the Forth. But whiles I fall to wondering what you really think I'm worth. You're so ready to attack me with your silver skiing do, but hold your tongue a minute. I've got some words to give to you. You've told the folks around you that I'm the very stuff. It's okay. That Max the rustic ploughman is stern and wild and rough. You sneer at foreign dishes, poor devils are the trash, but you still prefer spaghetti to haggis, leeks and mash. At all your burn suppers, I play a major part. You shout and spout about me, then you stab me in the bloody heart. I wish my wings would bear me, but back home I would flee, to tell all the other Haggai how badly you treated me. Second last verse coming up. The oatmeal flocks would gather, and southward they would come, to stick big dogs of thistles up the Haggis bashers. No. So treat me with respect, man. Make sure I'm not disgraced. I may be bloody awful, but that's not how I taste. He was a founder member of the Tarbolton Bachelors Club. And he did these, he founded things and created clubs and all that. And yet, to be entered into that Bachelors Club, you had to be under 20, he was about 19, you had to have 5 previous girlfriends and at least 1 child by, well, he was a founder member. And secondly, another illustration of his club ability and the way he was a man's man. And it's not something I know much about myself, or my father was. He was inducted to the most prestigious Masonic lodge in the world, which was the Canongate, Edinburgh. And throughout the world of masonry and lodges, one of the pride of place pictures, like you've got here, is him being installed into Canongate. He was also a man's man, and had many, many friends. Old friends from school days, old friends from the villages, and friends in Edinburgh. In fact, he often gave money to friends he never saw again. The second then, he was an HR management consultant. He was the very first of that breed. How many folk here have been subjected to performance appraisals? How many folk have been subjected to the worst form of performance appraisal, which is the 360-degree performance appraisal? Right, well, I contend that Robert Burns was the first guy to do this, because he said in one of his famous poems to Allows, "O would some power the gift to give us, to see ourselves as others see us." That's performance appraisal. That's 360-degree performance appraisal. The first management consultant. Keeping with M, though, he wrote beautifully about women. He loved women. He loved lots of them. But he was also a bit of a misogynist. He didn't like married men, in his eyes, having domineering wives. A couple of examples. From Tam O'Shanter. Picture the scene. Tam, boozing at the nappy, market day, 10 miles away from his wife. He's in air, lapping it up, getting food, and a dirty night, and she's there really worrying about him because it's happened before. And this beautiful little bit of the poem says, "The mosses, waters, slaps and stiles that lie between us and our hame, where sits our sulky, sullen dame, gathering her brows like gathering storm, nursing her wrath to keep it warm." The second is in The Henpecked Husband, the opening line, "Cursed be the man, the poorest wretch in life, the crouching vassal to the tyrant wife." So forget, it wasn't one-sided, Burns, he was many-sided. So he espoused the beauty of women, the rights of women, the love of women, but he was a wee bit misogynistic. C, he was a man of conundrums and absolute contradictions. A couple of examples. He could, in some poems, be seen writing about the true pride in Scotland, and almost a Scottish nationalist. And then, later on, a total supporter of the Union. And perhaps the latter part, because he was an exciseman employed by the Crown, he sort of had to be that way. But a couple of examples here. Wha, this is about nationalism. Wha, for Scotland's king and law, freedom's sword will strongly draw. Freemen stand or freemen fall, let them follow me. Nationalism. Next one. There's haughty Gaul invasion threat, then let the loons beware, sir. There's wooden walls upon our seas, and volunteers on shore, sir. The Nith shall run to Corsincon, the Criffle sink in Solway, ere we permit a foreign foe on British ground to rally. We will never permit a foreign foe on British ground to rally. Contradictions. Another one. He espoused humanity, the legitimacy of everyone being equal throughout the world. And that's why he was picked up upon by the Kremlin and others, this whole enlightenment but at the same time, he was quite prepared to get on a ship in Greenock for Lord Dunmore to go and be an overseer in a slave plantation. So we've all got flaws. We've all got different sides. So I just want to paint a picture which isn't a sickly sweet, whole thing. A man of contradictions. A very attractive figure. Coming from Ayrshire, where he had made a bit of a name for himself, but hitting Edinburgh. The new salons of the new town of Edinburgh, the sophistication of soirees and music evenings, etc. He came and stormed into that situation. He was the man to be invited to every party. He was wanted. He was tall, dark hair, very, very striking black eyes. Has anybody got black eyes around here? Not black eyes, that one. Because if they have, they might be related. Very, very distinctive figure, very attractive figure to men and women. And one of those occasions, for the one lady in his life he could never touch was Agnes, named Clorinda, Meikle Clorinda. She was a beautiful woman. She was married to a very rich Edinburgh merchant, and Burns met her in a room one Saturday night in a salon, not in her place, in someone else's place, and he was immediately attracted to her. It was a bit like George Clooney meeting Michelle Pfeiffer for the first time. But it wasn't to be. She was attracted to him, he was extremely attracted to her, but the mores of the time did not allow anything to happen, and she then eventually moved her husband to Canada. However, Agnes's laundry maid did meet him, and he did with Agnes's laundry maid. But his generosity, generosity, having lost that woman, really loving her, and she the same, but they couldn't do it. When she left, he was so generous. He wrote this letter, Ye Fond Kiss, which turned into a poem, but he was so generous in his thoughts about her. Fare thee weel, thou first and fairest. Fare thee weel, thou best and dearest. Thine be ilka joy and treasure, peace, enjoyment, love, and pleasure. I think that's generous. He was also generous, as I said before, giving lots of money to people, never getting it back. So he was a fool, generous fool in that way as well. International appeal. His books and his poems are still in print, have been translated into 22 languages, and constantly in demand. Abraham Lincoln had the Kilmarnock edition by his bedside, and often said that Burns was an inspiration to him. Nelson Mandela, similarly, made the same point. Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations, ditto. The Kremlin boys loved him because of his revolutionary views about equality and the number of translations into Russia over the years have been enormous, and there's Burns supporters that would choke a horse going on in Kremlin all the time. He was a scholar. At the age of 14, he could read Latin and speak moderately good French. 14 years of age. His father made sure that this talent was spotted early on, and he employed a number of schoolmasters to privately coach him through. How many people around here can read Latin now and speak French? Ah, right, there's a clever man there. You've got one?
Well, there's a few hands.
Oh, sorry, okay.
We will test them later.
So, a very early days, taking it all in, very clever guy, and as a scholar. He was also a soldier. He was an officer in the Dumfries Volunteers, and this was at the time when Napoleon was threatening Britain, or it was perceived that Napoleon would pose a threat to Britain. And he joined up as an officer, like they did all over Scotland, all over Carlisle, etc., the volunteer forces. And they were very, very keen on this, because they thought, in Dumfries, the River Nith, going out to the Solway, that those sly, sleek-it Frenchies, clever, sleek-it people, rather than coming from Calais to Dover the short way, right, would come all the way round, up the Solway, right up the Nith, into Dumfries, and they'd be ready for them. And at his funeral, 10,000 people lined the route, 5,000 of whom were volunteers from Glasgow, from Edinburgh, from Carlisle, from Newcastle, because of his fame and reputation and because of all the connections he had. He had so many different connections in his short life that 10,000 people, 5,000 of which were there. He was a satirist, brilliant satirist. Now, which country is this? He hated hypocrisy. Which country is this? Where the women couldn't go out the doors with their hair showing. They had to have their head covered. Where no amusements of any sort were tolerated. Where people were encouraged to clype, to tell on their neighbours if they were out of order. And if there was any hochmagandi going on, extramarital sex going on, they were reported to the authorities and they were punished for it. Where is that about? Rural Scotland in the second half of the 18th century, where the Knoxian view of Protestantism took hold very strongly, and the life, the social life of the entire population was totally governed by the church. You had to turn up. You were fined if you didn't go to church on Sunday. There was also the penitent stool, which was a great thing if you were caught doing hochmagandi. So Burns on 3 occasions had to sit on the penitent stool and be shouted at and humiliated by the congregation and the minister, who would be pointing down to that sinful person sitting on 3 times. I think a bit of a record in Ayrshire. He was an exciseman. He worked for the Crown. The last 6 years of his life, having failed as a farmer, having brilliantly succeeded in Edinburgh, sold a lot of books, made a lot of money, spent a lot of money, tried his hand at farming, but in the very bitter soil of the tenanted areas he was in, poor soil, he never made it, 3 or 4 failures. He took a job as an exciseman, and that meant, based out of Dumfries, he had about 20-mile radius of Dumfries, and that was his patch. And he had to go and collect all the customs and taxes and excise taxes from all the people in the area, farmers, etc., etc. Sometimes he would ride 20 miles a day on his horse. But he was also forgetful, because sometimes, the sailors know all about this, wee boats would come in with wine and things, and tobacco and things like that, and, small things. And he forgot about that. And then there were folk brewing whiskey in their back garden and things like that, and he forgot about that as well. So he was a very forgetful exciseman, which made him very, very popular in the whole area. He also believed in exorcism. When you think there's a problem in the house and you get a priest or a minister to come and they shoo away all the bogles and the witches. Well, he was brought up, his mother and her sisters were very much into that, the sort of folklore of bogles and witches and warlocks, and he absorbed all that. A lot of that came out in Tam O'Shanter. But how many folk believe in exorcism in the room? Do you believe in it? I do. I've got actually personal experience of it. Back in Scotland, when I was living there 40 odd years ago, my Uncle Bobby would come round to our house every second Friday for his dinner and a drink. And when he was gone, there were no spirits left in the house. So I believe in exorcism. I'll finish off now with 2 eyes, another 2 eyes. Imagination and inspiration. I picked these 2 things out and put them together. Imagination. Burns was on his way from Glasgow through to the Highlands, coming through the Stirling area. By the way, again, part of the whole thing, he was in a Bentley. Carriages about maybe 5 or 6 carriages, and he was in the Bentley of the carriages. So he was never a poor guy at all, until he lost it all. Going past the fields of Bannockburn, which is, as you know, a famous battle in the history of Scotland and England. And he paused, and he began to imagine what Bruce would have said to his men on that fateful day for Scotland. Now, this happens to be a Scotland-England thing, but it could be and I hope you'll see it that way, as something which could be Estonia fearing a big neighbour, or Ukraine fearing that, any small country surrounded by a bigger one and feeling the threat of invasion. It's the same sort of thing for them. Picture the scene. A June morning, a very hot one, very unusual. The steam was rising from the bogs, 6 o'clock in the morning, June, early morning. And over there, where that big fella sitting over that muffled Glasgow's over there, over there, 17,500 crack English troops fought their way through the borders, taken Edinburgh, came through Falkirk, on their way to Stirling to take Scotland. King Edward leading them well. And over here, by the lady with that lovely sash, 7,500 raggle-taggle group of boys and girls from all parts of Scotland, formed up by King Robert the Bruce to defend Scotland against him over there. It's a bit like Willie Carson taking on Tyson. And I'll read you what he imagined Bruce would have said to inspire his troops. Scots, wo hae wi Wallace bled. Scots, whan Bruce has often led. Welcome to your gory bed, or to victory. For now is the day and now's the hour. See the front of battle now. See approach proud Edward's power. Chains and slavery. What will be a traitor knave? Who can fill a coward's grave? What's the basis be a slave? We'll let them turn and flee. And nobody did. And war for Scotland's king and law. Freedom's sword will strongly draw. Freemen stand, or freemen fall. Let them follow. Follow me. For by oppression, woes, and pains, and by our sons in servile chains, we will drain our dearest veins, but we shall be free. Lay the proud usurpers low, tyrants fall in every flow, and liberties in every blow. Now let us do, or D. The rest is history. In rugby terms, the team in the blue and white got 4 tries and a bonus point, and the team in the red and white, nul point, a lang road home. D, depression. All brilliant people, we know them in our own families, we know them up and down. Brilliance comes sometimes with depression, the highs and the lows. And you get these highs and a lot of lows. And I've got an example of depression coming through Portsmouth Harbour Station. No, it's not about that. No. I met someone I hadn't seen for a while. He was a London Scottish rugby fan for many years ago. I like Macintosh. And he was sitting just before the steps, slumped like that. I said, hello, Jock. I said, you're looking awfully depressed. He said, Jock, I'm almost suicidal. I said, come on, what's wrong? He said, well, 4 weeks ago, my favourite Aunt Euphemia, died in Inverness, and she left me her house worth $1 million. 3 weeks ago, after paying 20 years into the National Lottery, Jock, 20 years, I won £100,000. And he said, 2 weeks ago, the London Scottish 200 Club, we've been pegging to that for about 40 years, and he won $1,000. I said, look, I don't know, but listening to that, I think people who'd had your bad luck would be very, very happy. Why are you depressed? He says, see last week, Jock, bugger all.